everybody knows what consistency is, right?
Right.
But at the same time, it's the hardest thing to do, I believe, especially for someone like me. I come from a creative mindset. I
Mm.
bored easily. So when I think about, imagine doing something over and over and over again, but understanding that that's going to get you the best results when you're someone who's always looking for the new shiny thing. And a lot of us do that. We look for the new shiny thing, a new way to do this. Maybe it's a new, personally, maybe it's a new diet, right? Maybe it's a new something.
Right.
In an organization, it could be about a new process, or suddenly there's a new bell whistle technology, right, that we have to bring into the mix.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you create a culture of consistency, what you do is you establish what are the actions that we need to take to achieve success. And whether that's in sales, whether that's in leadership, operations, finance, your legal department, whatever it may be, the bottom line is if you're doing the same things over and over and over again, you're going to get those results. And yes, you have to pay attention to what's happening in the industry and disruption and innovation and all of that sort of stuff. But it really comes down to doing the basics well, right?
Yeah.
I played football in college, and I heard it all the time throughout my junior and high school career: blocking and tackling, right? It's just
Right.
if you're doing the basics well, then you can build on that. But if we don't do the basics well, if we don't do the same consistent things well, then we are never going to have a culture that thrives.
Mm.
Left you speechless, didn't I?
Yeah, no, just there's so much to think about there. Just it's so this is I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, because this is something that I've seen a number of times from a wide variety, and people from a wide variety of fields, just talking about this concept of, you look at the people who are super successful. There's a tendency to think that it happened overnight, right? And there's a tendency to think that they did this one really magical, great thing, and that's what did it. And every time when you look deeper, it's nope. They did the basics for 10 years and nobody noticed until they had created this enough momentum where now there's this tipping point, and then it seems like overnight they're successful, right? And that applies to just so many fields that I can think of. This is kind of what you're pointing to, right? Is the
Well,
the things
absolutely.
that aren't so exciting, right? Like, I think when you were talking, I was thinking of John Wooden, greatest basketball coach probably who ever lived, had the best basketball players in the country coming to play for him at UCLA. The first practice they did every time was, let's practice putting your socks on. Now let's practice tying your shoes. And you got to imagine these basketball players, right? They got these egos the size of the moon, right? And they're like, what? Do you know who I am? I scored 40 points a game. I know how to put my shoes on. Every practice, every year, that's how they started, right?
Yep.
He won a lot of championships. I think he was something. So, yeah. So is this what you're pointing to? Is just like having it's almost like the courage, right? To say like, yeah, it's not as exciting to execute well on the basics, but you're never going to be able to do the stuff that's exciting if you don't have the consistency of executing on the basics, right?
I think that's the key. And you just said that it's the consistency to execute on the basics. And if you can execute the basics based on what we've already talked about, what are the values, right? What are the things that, so you mentioned Ritz-Carlton again, right? You might think, oh, this exceptional service, but the exceptional service is really based on the basics, and their mission as ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen, right? And so if you really think about that mission, you go, okay, that says something about who you are, and it says something about who you're serving. So act accordingly and do the basics based around that. And I do believe that the more we think about this idea of, making commitments, not decisions, because if you think about consistency, that really comes back to commitments. When you're committed to your brand, when you're committed to your people, your team, you're always going to make the right decisions because it's always based on that. And if leaders look at themselves more as brand managers for themselves and their teams, it's not about, well, if it feels good, do it right now. It's more about, is this best for me? Is this best for the team? Is this
Mm.
going to get us closer to our goals? And if not, then we're not going to do it.